mean, I guess we can start, I guess, since we've got you here on this very topical day where energy is the front of all the papers.
Yes.
Can you, I mean, tell us in one sentence what's gone wrong and what's going on?
First of all, can I just say thank you very much, everybody, for waiting. It's a beautiful day. So I really appreciate there's so many of you here at the end of what must have been a really thrilling, but also mentally challenging day. So anyway, thank you for sticking around. Now, what was the question?
I think you were going to tell us in one sentence or 3 words. We heard Dominic Cummings speak yesterday. He said you got to do everything in 3 words. Yeah, break that down, all that nonsense. So energy crisis here, or what is it? What's going on? What's going wrong with CO2?
3 words, CO2.
Oh, no, the carbon.
Okay. All right.
No, I mean,
so look,
yes, it's calmed down.
3 words are going to be difficult, but 3 themes then. So one, we have the globalization of the energy market, and we've seen this happen over the last 10 or 15, 20 years, where we think of the energy we use in our households as being, very straightforward. It's electricity, natural gas. They used to be very local markets. It used to be that you could have a massive shortfall in supply in one market and everywhere else in the world be unaffected. In today's world, everything is completely global. I mean, in terms of electricity, it's slightly less, but natural gas now is a globally traded commodity. And what happens in China, what happens in India, their policy changes as it relates to coal or carbon, that will impact households in the UK and Europe all over the rest of the world, because the price for natural gas is now a global benchmark. In terms of electricity, we're going to see the same thing more and more. We're going to see interconnection over long distances. That will help bring more renewables onto the grid, but it's also going to lead to this interconnection of markets, so something we have to get used to. So globalization of the energy system, a shift towards renewables, which we should celebrate, but also that it's leaving us vulnerable. And it's something that there is, and has been for a long time, a small but important voice talking about the risks around the shift to intermittent renewables. And so when we think about the rollout of wind and solar, we also have to think about what happens on days like today when it's just not that windy. So what we need interconnected grids, we need intelligence in the system, we need lots and lots of redundant or backup power systems, and then the intelligence to use it wisely. And the ambition should not be to turn off every natural gas power station, or coal probably yes, but let's say natural gas, it's a great backup, okay? And if we had more natural gas, we could have more renewables. And that's one of the things we're learning in the last couple of weeks. If we had more natural gas contracts, more natural gas power stations, we could have more renewables on the grid, and then we'd have. I'm not suggesting we should be building more, but I think we're learning in the last few weeks. We have to be careful about thinking the real-world impacts of just shutting everything down. And then the last thing we've had, and the headlines that everybody reading, it's probably about poor regulation. We have seen over the last 10 years this enormous rush into the energy space. When OVO started in 2009, it was a really, really unfashionable thing to even think about. And everybody thought I was absolutely mad. In the last 5 years, there have been 70, maybe 80 new entrants into this space. They've all got the same, not all, but a lot of them have very similar business models. And then you get this shock to the system, and they're not very well equipped to survive. So we've had a problem with regulation. And I think it's a really good lesson for anybody thinking about starting a business. No matter how attractive it seems or how fast you can scale, if you don't end up with something that differentiates you from the competition, you can find yourself exposed to these market shocks. I think it's Peter Thiel, I think, has got the book 0 to 1.
Yep.
And one of the things I really remember with that book, that all successful companies are successful in different ways. All unsuccessful companies have failed to escape competition. And so what he means by that is that unsuccessful companies end up just in a race to the bottom on price, on something else. And you really have to focus on finding a way that you're adding value to your customers or stakeholders that other people aren't. And I think in the energy sector for the last 4 or 5 years, we're seeing this play out today.
And just one other question on that. Apart from, I mean, one thing I learned is you're early to fashion, so I think I'm going to go long these scarves, yeah, because everyone's going to follow. But the other thing is energy storage. This is a bit beyond my specialization. But so again, people are saying one of the UK's problem is only 2% storage, whereas other countries are storing 20 to 30%.
Yep.
Why is that?
It's an interesting headline, and the reason is historically we had natural gas in the North Sea, and we could turn on the taps anytime we want. So you don't need to build new natural gas storage if you've got these enormous reserves that you can control, whereas Germany, France, and so on don't. So when you compare one with the other, it's not a great comparison. However, UK North Sea gas production has been falling since the early 2000s, so it may be something to look at in the future. We're going to see new technologies emerge, though, and whether it's hydrogen-based or ammonia-based and so on, there will be other chemical storage mediums that we can use. And I've no doubt whatsoever in 10 years' time, European energy is going to look very different. But of course, you know, we're seeing in the headlines today and these last few weeks, you know, we can't wait for 10 years to get through this winter. We can't wait for that technology.
And what are the innovations you see in energy today that you would put money in, or do you? Can you, or is it just a conflict? I mean, can you invest in, there was a fusion startup I met just now. I mean, can you invest in nuclear fusion startups, or can you invest in hydrogen startups? Or
so I've actually looked at a nuclear fusion project in Oxford. That was really fascinating, and again, it's long lead cycle investment. I've no doubt we'll crack it. I don't know which technology will win. I think probably more realistic is to think about, for me or for us, is to think about things that will improve the chances of UK consumers decarbonising today. I mean, heat pumps, you'll have heard a lot about. There are amazing, simple technologies like heat pumps that could really transform the energy landscape in the UK. They're not very well supported by government, no matter what the headlines are. There's some really big, stupid policies that are in the way. One of the reasons I started the Zero Carbon campaign, which is about carbon taxation, the mission was to try to get the UK to be the first company to have a economy-wide carbon tax. One of the perverse incentives we've got at the moment is that all of the costs of the UK economy decarbonisation fall on electricity bills. So about a fifth to a quarter of the price you pay for electricity is to pay for the subsidies that go to renewable power generation. There is nothing for gas. So when you ask consumers to switch from gas-fired central heating to electric-powered domestic heating, you've got this massive disincentive that there is no tax on the gas and there's a tax on the renewable power. And so making changes like this are the things that are going to make the difference. And we have all the technology available today that we need. We don't have the market mechanisms, we don't have the government support, we don't have enough consumer demand. And everybody in this room, or certainly entrepreneurs in this room, if you're looking for opportunities that are, let's say, easier to execute and can make a big impact in terms of carbon, but also make a really great business, I would look for things that really impact consumer behavior or consumer demand for technologies that already exist. I had a great a friend of mine, actually a competitor, who was trying to explain to me the secret of managing software engineering teams. And he said, engineers, and I think it's probably true of entrepreneurs, engineers will typically try to work on stuff that is difficult but not valuable.
Yeah.
And the secret to running a successful business is to get your engineers to work on stuff that is easy and really valuable. And so if I think about nuclear fusion or some far-off technology, it's like, you can really put in a lot of hard work and never get there. But if you want to run a really successful business, try to find something that you can execute on today that is pretty simple and that really makes a big difference. Okay, and I'm not saying changing consumer behavior is easy, but it is achievable.
But I'm a bit worried this competitor was trying to steal your engineering stuff. He had a plan. So the plan was you put your engineers on the boring, easy stuff. Mm-hmm. They then get bored. Then he poaches them and says, I'm going to make you do the really difficult, hard stuff.
Yes. Well, then he goes bankrupt. So I get them all back.
Okay, you get them all back. Okay. No, but it's a serious question. I found that my best engineers would only, if I wanted them to stay, I had to give them really difficult problems because otherwise they'd get bored.
So my CTO talks about this and he says, look, there are some things that we need really, really great tech for, and there's other things we just need, we need it to work today. And anyway, we're here to talk about climate.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, you sort of alluded to this a bit, but Adair Turner, who spoke at our last climate conference, has done a speech where he says it's Greta versus Gates, so meaning science versus consumer behavior change.
Yep.
So where are you on the extreme, measures of consumer behavior change? Should we be telling people, no, you can't eat meat, you crazy person, no, you can't fly except for vertical, et cetera, or should we put more energy into science?
Okay. So let's just get one thing straight. If you're Bill Gates, nuclear fusion is a really good project for you. A couple of $1 billion here or there, who cares? For the rest of us, that's...
it's not his only thing to do.
No, I know, but if you're Bill Gates, it's got to be big to really make an impact, I suppose. But look, I would say on the Gates versus Greta, I haven't heard it described as that. I'm a massive believer that you can expect humanity to go back in time to some more primitive era where we give up things like flying or the technology that makes the world work today and supports 8 billion people. If we did what some of the demands of Extinction Rebellion, you would find we don't have enough food to support more than 1 billion people. And so the answer has to be more innovation, more science, more technology. I think if you want to start a business in nuclear fusion, you need to have a really rich uncle or equivalent. But there are lots of things we can do today that will make the difference. And technologies like heat pumps, you put in 1 unit of energy, you get 3 units of heat out. It's stuff like this that's going to make a difference. But I really believe, and this is one of the passions that I had in starting Vertical Aerospace, which, by the way, is an eVTOL company. We sold 50 aircraft today. We announced the sale.
Today?
Today, yeah. So far, we're like 1,400, but we did 50 today, we announced. That's what's on the card.
Not what's on the card. What's
but
on
that's
the 25?
Okay.
50. They're understating it, so you could double it today. He's doubling it right now, people.
Okay.
Okay. So
Good.
50 today. Amazing.
50 today. So one of my passions in this was, look, I love travel. I'm sure everyone in this room loves travel. There's always this tension, and increasingly so, about the environmental impact on flying. And so I thought, look, I really am passionate about decarbonizing flight. And so I started an electric aircraft company. And this is where I think it's a really good example where I don't really believe we're going to stop flying.
No.
So we just have to find a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. But bananas thing was not fine. And when? Sorry, the obvious question. I don't know how much you can say about this, but so these eVTOLs are going to come. Who's going to be first? When do you think you'll get one out?
Yeah. So we have about 250 engineers working in Bristol.
Yeah. On the easy stuff or the hard stuff?
I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, who knows? So the first test flight for the certification model, so the production model, is going to be in Q1 next year. We've got a 3-4-year test program, so we should be certified in 2024. I think we will be first, or just about first. There's another company, Volocopter, in Germany. They're doing really cool stuff with like a multi-copter, so like multiple rotors, no wings, short range, single passenger. Our aircraft are 4 passengers and a pilot, so 100-mile range, so more useful. But they could come to market first. But actually, there's 3 or 4 different companies all working on slightly different designs. This will be a reality in the middle of this decade. And so we'll be flying an electric aircraft before you know it.
And I mean, one of your competitors did a good talk actually about these sort of second-order effects and consequences of this, of when you guys are super successful and when this is really low cost. I mean, it changes the geography of cities, right?
Yes.
I mean...
If you imagine you want to travel, so the range of our vehicle is about 100 miles. We're also working on a range-extended version that will follow the first launch edition. So that will be either a hydrogen fuel cell hybrid or a combustion engine with sustainable aviation fuel hybrid. That will give us a 500-mile range. So literally you could take off. This is not a flat roof building, but if you had a flat roof building, you take off here, you fly at 250 miles an hour, and you land on a building in Paris in like an hour. Okay. So if you imagine the other way to get to Paris is to go to Heathrow, which is an hour from here minimum, and then wait, and then get on the plane. It takes 20 minutes to get from the terminal to the runway. And then you take off and you land and you do the same in reverse. So if you imagine being able to take off from a rooftop, fly at 250 miles an hour, land on another rooftop, the best connected parts of a city are going to be the buildings that you can depart from. So it's going to change. The best connected, the closest place to Paris in London will be the vertiport or skyport that we can take off from. Because if you've got to travel 20 minutes or 30 minutes to get to that takeoff point, and then it's an hour, and then it's 30 minutes the other direction. So those points will connect cities to each other.
Yeah. And what's it going to cost me to get to Paris in 5 years' time or 10 years' time?
Yeah, I can tell you, to get from here to Heathrow, for example, that's an hour. It'll probably cost about £50 one way. So, yeah, I mean, that's buying one seat in a vehicle that's leaving. But still, it's when we model the biggest cost of the aircraft is the battery degradation. So every time we go through a cycle, the capacity of the battery fades, which means the range gets shorter, and we swap them out every 6 months to maintain this 100, 120-mile range. That's the biggest cost in operating the vehicle. And we've modeled it now. thousands and thousands of simulations. We're getting to about $1 per passenger mile in US terms over a 25-mile mission. So $40 is about £30. That's the cost, including landing fees, pilot fees, everything else. So assuming not every flight is full and the operator wants to make a profit margin, it's going to be about £50. But that's 9 minutes to land at Heathrow.
Wow.
So it's really cool.
It's really cool. Can you work a bit harder and do it quicker, please?
I mean, absolutely, but
I distracted
the engineers by that, and then
and talking about doing it quicker, so one of the ways you've been able to do it quicker is to raise a lot of capital and get a lot of strategics, right? So you've got a lot of contracts, you've got a lot of strategic investors, and you did a SPAC. So tell us a bit about how you thought about that part of the journey.
So we were quite happily working away in Bristol and being very British about this and just thinking, look, we'll just go and build our airplanes, and when they're ready, we'll tell everybody, and it'll be great. And there's no point creating a whole bunch of fuss because nobody can fly in them yet, and it's going to be years away. So we were just like very engineering about it and tinkering away. And then some of our competitors that were a little bit more, West Coast US, they were a lot more like, let's sell the crap out of this now. we haven't built any aircraft at all. We haven't really hired a lot of engineers, but we can tell this great story and bring it to life. And I have to say, I got a great lesson about this after being in business for 10 years. I started asking myself, what am I doing here? We need to tell our story. We need to capture people's imagination and have them come with us. And I think this is something, I think in the UK, we have great engineering, we have great academia, we have great business minds. One of the things that we should really learn from the Americans is how to tell the story better and capture people's imagination. And now we've got partners in Rolls-Royce, in Honeywell, in Microsoft, in American Airlines, Virgin Atlantic. We're about to announce some more partners tomorrow. And it's like bringing people with you help you to succeed. So you've got to work at least a little bit on telling the story, and you can't spend all of your time thinking, look, when we crack this, when we solve the challenge, then it's going to be easy and successful. We found if we didn't catch up to our competitors, they were going to beat us, and they just started like a year ago, and we've been going for 6 years, but they were going to have more momentum. And so, yeah, it's been a whirlwind 6 months.
Yeah, I know it's interesting. There was somebody doing this preaching of sort of how it's the slow can win, and I think that doesn't apply when capital is so cheap, right? When you can, and I see lots of entrepreneurs say, oh no, I don't respect people. It's like, if your competitor can raise $1 billion and you're not doing it, you're sleeping at the wheel, right?
Yeah, and we said, look, we don't, for our business model, we don't need as much capital as the other people are, other companies are claiming that they need. We've got a great partnership ecosystem, and we're leveraging a lot of, especially UK technology. But we can't be like an order of magnitude out. Yeah. We have to be in the race, so we just decided to focus on it. And
SPACs. So SPACs were, mega fashionable.
They were so good.
They were so good. Is it holding up? 90% of SPACs apparently trading below the $10, but
I wouldn't pay anything. So the economics for SPAC investors are great. You put your money in a SPAC. Anytime you want it back, basically you can ask for it back. Banks will lend you like almost 10 to 1. So you put in $1, you get a $10 investment in a SPAC, and then oftentimes you get 50% of the amount you put in free warrants. You can anytime sell your shares on the exchange, and when it comes to the deal being announced, you can vote to get your money back. Yeah. But you keep the options, you keep the warrants. And so it is literally a free option. Yeah. You end up with a whole bunch of investors that just put their money into all SPACs they can to get the warrants and the options. And then whenever the share price goes to $10, they just sell. Yeah. So at the moment, no SPAC is trading above $10 because there's a bunch of hedge funds that are just selling. So our job then is to try to find a way to get new buyers for the stock. And also then in the PIPE, which is private investment in public equity, that's where we've got the investment from our strategic partners like Rolls-Royce and Honeywell, Microsoft, and so on. So that money's there, that's solid, and so on. So the SPAC market is like, it is not all it's cracked up to be. Yeah. It's not the answer to a terrible business or an unfundable business, but it is definitely a faster way to go public, to access public equity. And the way I look at the whole SPAC phenomenon is that I equate it to public market venture capital. So for the last 2 decades, there's been huge amounts of private venture capital going into high growth early stage businesses. Very few fast growing businesses are going public or have gone public. So public market investors have not had the opportunity to invest. And SPACs have given an easier path for high growth or high potential growth companies to go public and tap new pools of capital. It is not a better road to success. It's not necessarily better than staying private, but it does mean that public market investors get access to venture capital-like investments.
And actually, in a bigger sense, it does feel like there's quite a lot of climate tech SPACs, and there seems to be appetite for that. And there are a lot that fall into your amazing category, but those that have sort of slightly longer-term vision that the sort of traditional public IPO might not be exactly right, but the SPACs are right for. So I mean, I know there's, I saw Eric Anderson the other day who's done, I think, about 3, right, and hydrogen SPACs and all sorts of stuff. So do you think that could actually be an accelerator for climate solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at this earlier this year, and the SPAC party's kind of over now, right? It's not a bonanza anymore, and you can get really great businesses funded, but there's a bit of an overhang from what's gone on before, and some not great businesses, I think, have probably come to market. But I looked at this and I thought, you know what, there is almost an unlimited pool of capital to support investment in climate, energy transition or climate tech. And I think wherever you look, there is an increasing allocation to funds or themes that support decarbonization. I would say we're probably, as I said, going through a bit of a hangover where we had this massive party and there were lots of, everybody's heard some great pitches and everybody's heard a lot of really bad pitches. And so I think over time, this will settle down, and in the coming months we'll see, but I think that's here to stay, that the asset allocation to climate tech or energy transition investments is here to stay. And I think for great ideas that are going to make an impact, that have a disciplined or executable business model, then I think there's going to be capital available. I've always had this idea that number 4 on your list of things to do never gets done, so just 3 things is like the number of things you can focus on. And we've built this platform so that, even with thousands of people, everybody can see what the top company goals are and how their goals cascade from there and follow progress. So it's a great piece of tech. OKR software, I think what we're calling it now.
Yeah.
Kaluza was the operating system that we built to run OVA1, and we found that it's a bit, what we want to be is the Ocado for energy. And we were talking to Tim Steiner about this at the weekend. Yeah. So energy retailers all over the world, utilities are like really not great at tech, so we thought if we share our tech with them, this is a great opportunity. So again, we spun that out. Vertical is really the only other business that I've started, I would say, that other than OVA. But there's always been lots of ideas.
Yeah. And if you were, so, I mean, you've given some clues. So if you were an entrepreneur starting today, the last thing is, what business would, you said the one you do for climate tech, but if there was anything you could launch to sort of all entrepreneurs listening, what would you go after?
What would I do?
Yeah, what would you do? If you weren't doing any, if you could do anything today and you had no baggage.
Heat pumps. Okay.
Heat pumps.
Let me tell you something, heat pumps. And I'm
one thing
probably never going to get around to this.
Okay.
Like, there's a government mandate to have like 20 million heat pumps in the UK in the next 10 years, right? We're selling 20 or installing 20,000 a year at the minute. So it's got to go up by a factor of like 100. So if you start a heat pump business, like, that's a really good tailwind to be operating from. There's a government mandate to increase the supply by 100x.
Okay. Climate tech will have 5% for the idea. Yeah. And we'll put it back into more decarbonization. Am I allowed to ask questions from the audience, or are we?
Yeah, of course.
One question from the audience. Come on, people. Yes, well done. Thank you. Yes, at the back. You can shout if you want, or I know you got one there. The mic there. Thank you.
I'd like to ask about the scale that you know, of your ambition for vertical. So how many people do you envision, and how many of your eVTOLs do you imagine flying in space?
So we have it's a really good question. Let me think how to best answer that. I think we probably need to get the 300, 350 engineers to design and certify our current launch edition, the X4. I told you already we're working on and want to develop a hybrid variant. We'll carry 8 passengers, so that's a whole nother vehicle to certify and develop. We'll be thinking about manufacture and so on. It's hundreds of jobs in the UK to manufacture, I hope in the UK. The rates of production that we're talking about, 1,000 a year, are like unheard of in aerospace. They're more like high-end automotive. But these are relatively small vehicles compared to an Airbus or a Boeing. So it's probably a good comparison. If you look at a typical aircraft, an automotive factory that's turning out 1,000 high-end vehicles a year, it's the hundreds and hundreds of jobs. We're going to be opening multiple plants around the world because there'll be maintenance and overhaul and assembly to do regionally. So it's going to be quite a big operation, I think. But if you imagine, I mean, already they're conditional, and of course we have a lot to do before we complete the transactions and so on, but we obviously have to certify the aircraft. We've already sold more than 1,300, 1,400 of these aircraft. That's about $6 billion worth of these aircraft, and we've only been selling them for the last 6 months. And that's from Japan, from Brazil. We just announced 250 today from Brazil. American Airlines, the world's largest airline, won 350. Virgin Atlantic won 150 for the UK. These vehicles will change how we think about flying around. And if you think HS2, this wonderful piece of infrastructure we're going to build here in the UK, 220 miles from here to Manchester, it's $150 billion, 100 billion pounds to build. So these vehicles will be able to do that distance in the same time with no infrastructure. So it is going to be an enormous opportunity, and I think the UK is really poised to lead on electric aircraft.
Great. Well, that's fantastic, and that's a great way to finish. But I do want to thank you, Stephen, because the UK only has very few double unicorn or multiple unicorn founders, so we are thrilled that you've taken the time to tell us about some of your businesses. So
thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.